excited to be hosting this first ever virtual panel specific to our ALSD vendor members. It's a resource we want to provide during these times, and I'm excited to be accompanied by two panelists who have a lot of experience with what's going on right now. The structure today is an Ask Them Anything panel. We've received a number of questions beforehand, but you shouldn't hesitate to also ask questions while we're live. I think we may have time to get to a few that are asked live. We've got a set of questions that I've had a chance to review with both Rob and Larry. And if you need any assistance with how to ask those questions, there's a little toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and there's a Q&A button. You can ask your questions to the panelists, and I'll be sure to try and address them within time. It's 30 minutes, so it'll go quick. And if we can't get to everything today, we're going to try to do another one of these in the future. So now I want to go ahead and turn it over to both Larry and Rob. We'll start with Larry. Just give us your name, title, the organization you're with.
Yeah, hi, Larry Witherspoon. I'm the Senior Vice President of Commercial for the PMY Group.
I'm Rob Hunden, President and CEO of Hunden Strategic Partners based in Chicago. Max, you're muted.
There we go. I'll stick with Rob. Rob, could you give us an overview of how Hunden, your firm, is looking at the situation right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So those who are on this may know that we do the State of the Industry for ALSD each year, and we started doing it internationally last year. So we're sort of big picture looking at trends in development and design and funding, as well as the districts around these facilities. So we're very interested as we track both sports and entertainment, but also convention centers and any other large multi-purpose venue for events. We're looking at how this is going to impact them going forward, and are there really any permanent changes, or is this a blip in time that we'll get around? And so we're really looking at everything from hotels to concert venues to sports venues to premium, just to really understand the mitigation that's going to occur this year, and then sort of moving forward, does design and do other things change as a result? So that's what we'll be talking about, and that's what we're looking at constantly.
Thanks, Rob. Larry, how about PMY Group?
Yeah, I think we're on the kind of a little bit on the other end of the spectrum where Rob and his team are. We're more focused right now with our venues and, convention centers and across our verticals and getting them open and the technology they need to help them get open and the plans in place for that. So very focused on, what's a good common sense approach that they can take to provide, well, frankly, to limit liability, as well as provide fans, which we believe probably the most important thing, provide fans that feeling of safety. So things that are easy to implement, reusable technology. So it's not just a COVID one-hit wonder, but stuff that actually has long-term value to the venue post the pandemic. So that's the focus, is really just getting them open safely.
Yeah, thanks for each of those introductions. And that, in our description for this panel, we'd like you to have some takeaways around what kind of venue reopening concepts are being looked at, maybe what's happening in parallel industries. And I'll start with Larry, because not only do you have some insight into those points, but you also have some insights because PMY is headquartered in Australia. Australian and Asian venues are starting to reopen. So in a way, you've got a little bit of a crystal ball into how that's going. Could you share with us some insights that would help us in the US and even Europe predict what's going to happen as far as reopening concepts?
Yeah, I think, look, it's still early stages, but we do have a couple of venues in New Zealand that are looking to open early to mid-June. They've kind of taken the approach with the government of a lead, not wait. So they're like, here's what we're offering. Here's how we believe it complies. And then just see how the government reacts based on what they're thinking. Because as we all know, if you wait for the government to decide on something, it's going to take forever. But what we've seen the focus to be is really, obviously they're going to be limited to 25 to 30% capacity. They're focused on ingress, egress, and movement within the building. So cutting down from 6 gates to 3 gates for ingress, egress, limiting movement within the venue. So if you've got a field level seat, you're not going to be wandering to the upper level and things like that. You're going to be kind of stuck where you're at. And then a lot of focus around digital signage around the venue. So constantly reminding people, you know, when you're outside, here's the protocols that are in place. You have to wear a mask, maintain social distancing. You know, we've now implemented contactless ticketing. Make sure you've downloaded the app. Make sure your ticket's ready to scan. Same thing with payments, right? Have this app so you can pay. We're not taking cash. So that kind of approach. So really just improving the flow of people. And then operationally, they will be doing temperature checks on employees only. So the employees have a little bit more of a process to go through. And then we're also implementing a lot of camera AI for people. So operationally, they can look at, are we seeing people massing where we don't want people massing in a certain area? And if people are in line, are they maintaining social distancing? So we're layering on, you know, AIs for that, that can actually not only send a notification to the crowd of, hey, spread out, but if it continues, we can actually notify operational personnel to go down there and, you know, tell people that they need to spread out and take action. So it's a very common sense approach.
Yeah, with the digital signage, are they capitalizing on their existing infrastructure, or in some of those cases in New Zealand, are they also adding new signage?
Yeah, so in the case of our first venue to open, we're adding new signage around the park, around the area of the venue. We'll probably drop in a few extra monitors where we believe there's the potential for massing or queuing of people. But in most cases, like on the US side, in most cases there's monitors where we would take over a monitor that's, you know, showing the game in front of a concession stand. If we detect social distancing violations, we can then send a notification that will trigger that TV. While operations is getting triggered, that TV will get triggered with a warning as well to the people directly.
Got it. We at the ALSD, we've also seen proposals in which there's a big watch party screen in the parking lot, and then you try to capitalize on that inventory. Rob, how about you? You've also got experience with not just sports venues, but hotels, different types of destinations, convention centers, public facilities. Are there any insights from those industries or that part of the industry that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's obviously hit our industries the hardest, you know, any mass gathering event. And I think, you know, what's interesting is that sort of like post 9/11, we're seeing that there's going to be an eagerness to travel, but by car. I think people are going to avoid wanting to get on planes, or just for a number of reasons, both the hassle factor and the unknown safety factor. So local drive-to events, we do believe will be, it'll be more local, regional. So there's a real opportunity from a marketing perspective to market to those groups. So when we're talking about hotels and convention centers or major sporting events from a long distance, it's more likely that your audience is going to be more localized. What we've also seen, we've started to see hotels really start to come back, although there hasn't been a huge spike, but it is coming back about 2.5 occupancy points per week. We hit about 23% occupancy, with about 20% of hotels closed down. So it actually indicated more like probably a 18% occupancy when you took those into consideration. Now we're back, as of last week, we're at about 32.5%, and more hotels are opening. So we feel like by mid to late summer, we'll be back in sustainable, in a sustainable occupancy rate. ADR obviously is going to be low. So it's going to be tough sledding for hotels, but they will come back sooner than the airlines. In terms of convention and conference facilities and the events where, you know, major sports venues participate in those kinds of like large consumer shows, trade shows, oftentimes the floors of those venues are used for those kinds of things. If it is a product and display type of event, we believe that those will come back as soon as they safely can. Unfortunately, for things where it's more sharing of information and training and professional conferences, we're seeing that, there's a big value play in everyone learning to use Zoom like we're doing now. And so that may hinder sort of the comeback of a lot of those face-to-face kinds of meetings and events. So we are concerned about that, but we're also literally today participating in something that's usurping that a little bit. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. And I think it's going to have to drive innovation from both the facilities, whether it's a sports facility or a convention facility, to be more things to more kinds of events. One of the things that we've seen is, of course, the office. The very notion of a white collar office is potentially going away or changing in a big way. But the idea of doing a WeWork is not kosher for a lot of folks. And so could convention and event facilities pivot and start hosting corporate get-togethers once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks, whatever, in the absence of a physical office? So we're looking at those things. And then specifically on the sports side, on premium, I know that's a question that's coming up. I'll be interested to get Larry's thoughts on it. But, everything had been trending towards the social environment away from suites. And now that potentially could reverse. I don't think it wants to. We're definitely going to get away from buffets and things of that nature. But we're trying to assess how things are going to come back in the premium space, because people do absolutely want to be social, but they want to be safe. And so how this, I think we're still in a little bit of an unknown on that. But anyway, we can talk about it. I've answered about probably 3 questions more than you asked, so I'll let you get back to it.
That's okay. That's okay. I like to say that Rob is the most photographed attendee at the ALSD when he does his State of the Industry presentation. And piggybacking on some of the things you just said, as far as new development, that's something that State of the Industry covers. What are the cities that might see a new sports venue? Things like that. I mean, as new development, what's that on the spectrum, Rob? Has that totally stalled? Is it still a lot of it going on?
No, I think certainly, like with any financial pullback, that hits the fiscal coffers of the cities. And so that's gonna, I mean, technical term, it's gonna suck for a lot of architects and construction companies that need that pipeline to go forward. Obviously, as we track that kind of stuff, we haven't seen projects go on hold, but it's sort of what you don't know that didn't happen, right? So there are things that were in the works that are now on hold. So just as an example, major multi-$100-million project in Texas that we've been working on for years is now at least a year pushed off, probably 2 to 3, because they rely on the hotel tax, the food and beverage tax, and all these related taxes. Those are immediately, and decimated means you lost 10%, right? It was one of every soldier's head got cut off or whatever. It's 9 times decimated. It's 90% drops in these things for a few months. And so we're expecting probably these tax revenues to come down by about 40 to 50% year over year. And that, that's just going to, and that's immediate for food, beverage, and hotel taxes and auto rental taxes. And then the property taxes that are paid in arrears, you're going to see that hit next year. So I think for major construction projects, it's going to be tough. And we're going to have to ride it out. But from a market perspective, here's what we're also seeing. So we track migration, where people are putting their money, and they're moving with their feet, they're voting with their feet. The trends that we were tracking, and I'd love to show you some of these just in map form, but the trends that we were tracking of people starting to bounce back away from the coastal gateway cities like Seattle, San Francisco, LA, New York, and even Boston in some respects, due to cost, heavy tax and regulation, homeless everywhere, and just overall sort of quality of life wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be when you put the congestion and the cost involved. There's been a huge rebound into sort of the Intermountain West. A lot of these cities that we tracked that people loved a couple of years ago, the cities on the verge, cities in Texas, Florida, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, even Des Moines, Grand Rapids, these are mid-sized cities that are easy to do business in states that are easy to do business in. We're seeing a huge, we think that this whole work from home, work from wherever the hell you are, helps these places in the interior have a shot. And so we think that, the Omahas, Des Moines, you name it, Grand Rapids of the world, and everywhere in Texas and Florida, pretty much carte blanche, are going to benefit because of this. So there could be some interesting sports ramifications in the next 5 to 10 years as you see some of this flight away from the big congested cities. So that's just, what we're tracking and seeing. I don't know if, Larry, you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I think you covered it. I mean, I do think I'll go back to, on the suite and premium side that we were talking about. I don't see that changing. I think we see the trend continue to the loge, and I think it'll just adapt based on, what the pandemic things are. As far as construction goes, we're actively involved in 3 stadium builds now. We're on the ground consulting. We haven't seen any significant change, except for looking at, what technologies have we not thought about implementing that we should implement for this post type piece. But that being said, Rob, we'll have to touch base. I think we might be involved in the same project in Texas that's getting delayed. But yeah, very, very similar feedback. I mean, look, it's a crazy world. I think a lot of stuff still has to get sorted out. I think if we see what's going on, especially in New Zealand and Australia, a ton of money on the government side is getting dumped into infrastructure. And a lot of that's going to, really speed up some of these venue developments, smart city and precincts. So it's going to be an interesting mix of how it all comes back.
Awesome. I think that provides good context for the vendors in the audience. Building on the suites, premium spaces, luxury suites, one of the questions we got beforehand was, do you think these spaces are going to be viable? We've heard some things about this at ALSD, and we only have about 12 minutes left. We might go a couple minutes over. So I'll do some quick hitter questions after this, but let me know, starting with Larry, what are you thinking about premium spaces?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see significant change. I mean, I think when it comes back, I think it's still a viable entertainment source for companies. I still think it's a good marketing source for companies. I do think, that the trend for the loge, where they're trying to build out more little specified clubs is going to still continue. But I don't think that the suite business is going away. I mean, I do believe that we're still going to see a reduction in suites for the more high-end, club areas. But that's my take on it. That's consistent, with what we're talking to people about.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, one of the things that premium allows you to do is actually have a little bit more space to roam around. And so, the trend that we've seen is going from suites or nothing to 7 different options and layers up the food chain of things that you can choose from. And so maybe now that as designers and teams come up with new stadium designs, there will be even more of those, and you get a chance to spread out. So, just like on airplanes, people are trying to figure out how many people can we fit safely. People maybe will want a little bit more space, and that's going to come at a premium cost. And so that'll be very interesting. But I agree with Larry. I don't think any of that's going away. And I also know that, necessity is the mother of invention, and there is so much freaking money riding on getting sports going again and getting colleges and universities going again. I sort of chuckle when you saw the state of California say, we're not opening our schools in the fall, the universities. And then you have, Purdue and Notre Dame and the SEC saying, no, we're going to figure out how to make this work. There's just too much riding on it. And so I think there's going to be a huge FOMO. There's going to be a backpedaling by those who, said they were going to do safety at all costs. And they'll come around, and I think they'll come around quickly, and they'll make some excuse why they came around. But I think you got to follow the money, and there's so much money, and there's so much pent up interest and demand that I think there are going to be some that get heckled at the beginning for coming out early, but they'll figure it out. They'll lead the way, and thank God for them, and they'll do it safely. But and they're going to have to work with their insurance carriers and their lawyers to make sure, because that's what. To me, that was what, when the NCAA and everybody shut down all on the same day on that Thursday night back in early March, Was it the 13th, I think. It was almost a legal risk and insurance risk question. It was sort of like, crap, we can't put people at risk. So now if they can figure out how to do that and people sign their waivers, then I think that's just me being maybe an optimist, but I think that's what's going to drive it.
Yeah. I was in Las Vegas on that Thursday night, and no selection Sunday on Sunday. A little bit more specific question we got beforehand that Larry mentioned in our pre-call that he may have some insights on. One of the companies in the audience is a manufacturer of washrooms, restroom products. This person's interested in learning what people want to do with their washrooms in a post-COVID world. Larry?
Yeah, so not 100% specific to washrooms, but we've obviously had a lot of conversations around deployment of sanitation stations, ensuring that trash cans are actually emptied out on a timely manner. So in a couple of locations, we're actually looking at implementing like smart asset tagging where when people go in, when they're checking the sanitation station, they're actually badging against it. So we can actually track and have a record. When they say that they changed the trash, when they say that they changed the bathroom, or they check the bathroom for cleanliness, or whatever protocol gets implemented for the disinfection protocols that get put in place when the venue opens, we can ensure that people were actually physically there. We can track how long they were there. We know how long it should take. So just to help them get a level of assurance that what they were expecting to have done was actually done and completed. So if you were in the sanitation business, man, if you sell hand sanitizer stations, you got a good year coming.
Yeah. Rob, any other thoughts on different types of spaces like restrooms and their utilization?
Larry and I and everybody else in the crowd that travels for a living, it's sort of the bane of your existence, having to go in and out of certainly airline bathrooms, airport bathrooms. The bathrooms at news stadiums have gotten way better. But, that whole experience has always been a little bit germy. And so I think places like McDonald's, again, follow the money. You're going to go out of business if you can't sort of prove that you can stay clean. So McDonald's, I think, has instituted a lot of things that will probably be followed in terms of being able to either go in and out of the bathroom without touching a door using your foot or just no doors at all. And then touchless everything else. And then instead of and I've always had a thing against the blow dryers that I didn't think were really effective anyway and just spread germs everywhere. I think maybe the CDC is going to maybe agree with me on this one now, and we're going to go back to hand towels and cutting down some more trees. That's, but we're seeing those companies whose very livelihood depends on that cleanliness factor, or at least the indication of cleanliness, are leading the way. So we've looked at McDonald's and some of these others, but even the airlines now too, with their partnerships with Clorox and all this kind of stuff, which is primarily a marketing gimmick. But we're keeping an eye on that, and I hope that in the new design of these facilities, as we track these trends, that bathrooms and if you've been to the new renovated terminal at the Minneapolis airport, at least the men, for the urinals, it's your own space. It's hard walls. It's, there's a complete separation. So for the women that are watching and don't know that world, it's been historically a wide open situation. And now, those individualized spaces, a little more space to move around. I think maybe that would be a nice design trend to come out of this.
Yeah. And it doesn't just apply to the washrooms, contactless, touchless. Larry mentioned it at the top of the call. You're trying to do things, Larry, that you would have done pre-COVID that enhance the experience. It's not just a reactive thing. It's what really enhances the experience for the future at these respective venues. There's so many technologies out there, Larry. You guys are helping teams and venues procure them, assess them. Are there any particular technologies that you're seeing fast forward now in their growth during this time, or just certain ones that the teams and venues are prioritizing? Because there's so many to look at.
Yeah, no, I think, look, the ones that we've seen really an increase in interest is obviously around camera AI. So the massing, the line queuing portion, which, before it was kind of like, oh, that's a really cool marketing thing. You know, we can tell people how long the wait is, to now it's actually turned into an operational need. Um, you know, contact tracing is an interesting one. You know, we've always been advocates of getting sensors out and tracking where people are and how long people are dwelling. It was really more around sponsorship activation. That's obviously changed now that we can help utilize that to see where people are actually at within a venue who was potentially around them. And access control, you know, a lot of people have not wanted to change out their, you know, 20-year-old turnstiles because they've got a $300 device and a, you know, $10 an hour employee scanning every ticket across these lanes. But, you know, now it really does make sense to look at, you know, what kind of money do we invest in access control to make that contactless, you know, frictionless, and, you know, honestly move the employees back into more of a kind of a check and see, just, you know, reacting to issues versus, you know, just trying to get people in the building. So those are the main things, you know, that we're seeing. Contactless payment, obviously, all those types of standard things that you would expect. And again, like I said, you know, our focus on this is not just for COVID, but to try and go into venues and talk about, here's the value of this post-COVID as well. Because there was value. We were selling these technologies before for a reason. Now you're super interested because it's an operational need, but let's have a conversation about how you monetize it and save money operationally in the long term as well.
Rob, how about on the design side? There's a lot of proposals and presentations out there on design considerations that go hand in hand with social distancing, and technology is an important component of those customer journeys. But how about the physical design of spaces? And sometimes it's not just in the venue, it's the outside of the venue as you're walking up to it.
Yeah, so I think that the last point you just brought up is maybe the most important, is sort of the queuing, the pre and post, but mostly the pre. You don't want people to have a bad experience waiting to come in if it's a longer process to come in. But you also want to give, just like airports had to be redesigned post 9/11. You know, Kansas City is a great example of an airport that was pre 9/11, and you literally can go from the curb to your terminal in about 20 feet. That wasn't kosher after 9/11. They're finally getting around to building a new airport. It's going to be the same for venues, and so now my guys in Minneapolis are super stoked now because they passed something allowing alcohol sales in the plaza pre-game. So I think there's going to be maybe we were already seeing a trend towards pre-game fun and atmosphere and plazas and events and all kinds of stuff, and that was meant to really just capture revenue and get a culture going with the team. Well, now it maybe is just a way to mitigate the hassle of waiting. And so, hey, if we can get you there a couple hours before and you can queue up, and again, if it's like the Disney thing where your buzzer goes off and then you don't have to stand in line, you just go when you're buzzed. I'm sure there's a lot of things like that will be, like Larry's working with all this innovation, that's going to happen. So I think it could really lead to more of a nice cultural change and establish some nice pregame fun in these plazas where they're built. So I think, interestingly, depending on weather, we may want to tent over some of those things or do some things to keep people out of the weather, because instead of a thing that you want to do, it's going to be something you have to do. So from a design perspective, we may need bigger entry points that are conditioned against the weather, especially in our northern climates.
Yeah, and we're at 12:30 here. I think each of you let me know that you could go maybe as many as 5 minutes over. If anybody in the audience has any questions that you'd like to ask, now would be the time to get them in. I do have one more question for you guys while we're waiting. Have either of you seen a creative solution proposed by a venue or team that is maybe an outlier that you haven't seen in as many places, but you're intrigued by it, even as just for discussion?
During this whole thing, whether I was trying to figure out what was going to happen to the stock market or baseball or whatever, you look to Asia, you look to South Korea to see what they were doing, because they were 6-7 weeks ahead of us, and it's tracked pretty consistently. So, and then Europe is, been a few weeks ahead of us, maybe 3-4 weeks ahead of us. So, for better or for worse, we can watch what they've done. So South Korean baseball, literally putting up the cardboard pictures of fans in the stands and going ahead and having baseball, but also figuring out ways that you can virtually be in your seat. So Larry, I don't know if that's a segue to you, because you know all this stuff. I'm just like cool, thinking it's cool. Is that happening?
Yeah, so we're having some talks specifically with a couple of different mobile apps, a couple that are engaged in, you call the play, right? So you engage, from your couch, but you're actively engaged. You're calling the play. It helps the team do some things around sponsorships. We're also looking at technologies to add LEDs to the stairs going up, so you get additional exposure on the TV, because a lot of these venues are trying to chase this, these sponsor makeup dollars and things like that. As well as we're looking at other things around spatial GPS and the ability to create treasure hunts, to actually put lights in seats and let the fans interact with those lights, where you can almost buy a virtual seat and even have a speaker where fans can yell from home and we can have it come out in the stadium. So yeah, definitely a few things that we've been talking through. Those conversations haven't really moved too quickly yet, but that's just because everybody's still trying to figure out how they're opening. And I think once they figure out how they're opening, I think a lot of these become pretty valuable conversations to have. But yeah, there's a lot of cool tech out there that I think can really be useful for the teams.
Yeah, and what about, Broadway shows, Broadway theater, same kind of concept. I feel like maybe they're a little behind the times versus the sports, but sports leads the way. They're very similar in so many ways. Could they do some of those same things? And what about pay-per-view?
Yeah, pay-per-view's never come up, I'll tell you that. I think for us, it's really about how do we virtualize the sponsor environment for them and the fan interaction. That's just been the focus.
I saw one of the Bundesliga team is actually charging money to have your cardboard cut out in the seats, and awesome. It has made a little bit of revenue off of that.
See, we'll add a speaker to it, then that guy can actually yell.
Yeah, exactly. We're basically at time. So I'd like to ask each of you if you have 30 seconds of closing thoughts. If you'd like, even present a way for everybody to get a hold of you after the panel if they have any questions to get in touch.
Yeah, I'll close it out. So look, it's crazy times, but I think there's a pretty good path forward. I think we're getting through this. What we just caution everybody with is technology is cool. Be very cautious in that you need to take a common sense approach. Technology won't solve everything. It won't make fans come back. So you have to make sure that there's technology that's forward facing, because you have to give people that sense of safety and security to make them feel better. That's why they beefed up the TSA like crazy, right? It made you feel better about getting on an airplane. And make sure that you're pursuing, technology that actually has long-term value. You don't want to spend a lot of money and have it be worthless in 6 months when the pandemic passes. So that's, the cautions that I would have, my closing thoughts, and that we really believe in a common sense approach, make the fan feel safe, reusable technology. And look, happy to talk to anybody. My email is pretty simple. It's larry.witherspoon@pmygroup.com. I'm happy to talk to anyone. And I thank you guys all for the time.
Yeah, I echo the thanks and appreciation. It's great to get together virtually, and thanks to ALSD for doing this. You can email me at rhunden@HundenPartners.com. Our website is HundenPartners.com. We have a COVID page that we post some interesting stuff on and some statistics. The news is getting better. You can also LinkedIn us, of course, LinkedIn. And ultimately, what I always say is, whatever point in time you're in, the conventional wisdom is it's not going to change from that. So when times are great, people can't imagine that it's ever going to suck. And when times really are terrible, people can't imagine that it's going to get better. But guess what? People are grinding it out every day. They're making moves, and things are changing under our feet, and we're watching and tracking those. And it's amazing to see the resilience and the innovation that comes out of these issues. So, we were sort of at the top of a peak anyway. So this gives us another one to climb up, and I'm frankly excited for where this goes. I'm sick about the 50% of tourism-oriented people that are out of work. I hope we can get that back as soon as possible. But I'm always optimistic about what humanity can do in the face of this nonsense. So let's just keep forging forward.
Well, thanks to both of you. We're pretty optimistic, and over the past couple of weeks, I think there's been some good news coming out. So that's good to see. Both Rob, Larry, thank you for your time. Thanks for making yourselves available, and we will continue the discussion into the future. So thanks everybody for attending, and you're welcome to get in touch with me at max@alsd.com. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
see you around.
Thanks, Larry. Bye-bye.
Bye.